Okay, team, this week we have a very special guest to join us on our 100th episode of the Rural Sales Show. This bloke needs no introduction, but he's a two-timed Rugby World Cup winner. He's a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit. He was named Steinlager Investor Super Rugby Player of the Year, and 8 of the 9 Super Rugby Championships from 2005 to 2014. In one of the most successful and dominant periods of All Blacks history and any sports team's history for the fact. And I think for the rugby geeks out here, that's about an 83% win record across 2 decades. Now, he was very dominant in that. He's played 94 tests from 2004 to 2015, and he's also New Zealand's most capped rugby union centre. If you haven't worked it out already, team, we've got Conrad Smith here. Conrad, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Lovely intro. I learned a bit myself with the latest stats.
All right, my friend. Now, so 100th episode. Very lucky to get a fella like you on board. I want to get straight into it. You were part of the leadership team. So I've been geeking out on all those wonderful books that Gilbert Anoka wrote and Mike Crone wrote, and they're wonderful. And when you were in that leadership team, tell the listeners why it was set up and what was involved and what did you learn about yourself and being part of that leadership team? What happened?
We start with that. I suppose that leadership wasn't anything new. I think when I came into the All Black frame, 2004, we had started talking about leadership groups. Previous to that, it had sort of been something, you'd always had captains within rugby teams. And then I think there was a growing awareness that there was a responsibility not just on the captain, but on other players. And then I think that sort of started to get formalised when I joined the team. So early 2000s, there was sort of this idea of having leadership groups and not just leading it to the captain. And that might have happened informally on the back seat of a bus. That's where the most experienced players and in rugby parlance, that's how the leadership group, probably in its origin, started. The guys that sat at the back of the bus, they were the most experienced, and they'd talk about what the team needed to do off the field or some other things related to on the field. And then, so yeah, I suppose when I came into the side, started to formalise that, we had guys like Gilbert Anoka seeing the importance of how that leadership group operated. And I wasn't involved at this time, so I'm sort of guessing, but there would have been conversations around, okay, we take these conversations from the back of the bus after training to a scheduled meeting, at a lunchtime or on a Friday before a game. And well, that's what my experience was when I joined the team. And as with most things, it didn't work out perfectly. Like I know, within that time that I joined the team, there was a very large leadership group. Because it become the thing to do, I think they sort of brought in a whole lot of players who weren't actually suitable. And we went through sort of 3 years where we were using this idea of a leadership group, and then come to a World Cup in 2007. For the All Black supporters who are listening, they know what happened at that World Cup. It all fell apart, and this idea of and this development around leadership groups had to be revisited, like most of the things we'd done in the lead up to that campaign. And then out of that, I think we sort of thought again around how we modelled our leadership group, what we wanted from leaders, and that's really where I came in, and that was my first experience in 2008. Totally peeled back what we were doing, had a much smaller group, brought in guys that wanted to be there, not just ones that were picked off and thought, oh, this is what we should do. That was my introduction into the leadership group, I suppose, to answer the question. It was sort of from 2008. I'd been there for 3 or 4 years. I was still relatively inexperienced, but I did want to be there, and in terms of wanted to grow, do more for the team, look after myself. That was always known within that leadership group. That's your number one role. You do your own job. But then there are obviously things outside of that, and we started to formalise that, and we'd meet through the week, as I sort of said before, and you sort of learn a bit about how you're going to fit in within that leadership group. And there's a whole lot that goes into it, but that was sort of the beginnings, and something, I played till 2015 and was involved within a group. We remodeled, we were always revisiting, thinking about how we adapt and change over time. But that was sort of a group that stayed together, and with the majority of players that stayed together as well for the large part of that time.
Now, Richie McCaw said, he quoted Conrad, "He's a bloody champion, I tell you. I rely on a lot of him for his advice. He's a really vital man to have." This is taken from the allblacks.com website, Conrad. I haven't just
Right.
made this up. And he says, "Doing my job, it's a whole lot easier having a man like this alongside you. Conrad's got a great understanding of what teams are trying to do, the psychological, mental side that goes with the game. He's the first one to have an understanding of what's required." So what do you think's behind that? Like, what do you think you've learned on the I would describe you as more of one of the more thinking All Blacks. They all had different qualities. You obviously have a legal background. You've been called Mr. Consistent. So when Richie sort of talks to you about that, like, what is it that you felt you brought into the mental or the psychological space in that leadership team over that long period that helped you help yourself and help others around you?
Yeah, I suppose it's a difficult one. Like the first thing I know, I had a different background for sure from most of the players. I'd sort of left school, went to study law. That's not normal. Finished a law degree and then came into rugby. But that was more by if someone had offered me a rugby scholarship or a rugby academy, I would have jumped at it and dropped the law. So that it wasn't exactly by design. But I do think like they're quite separate. I think the first thing I'd say, like equally, I've met some players that, how would you say, academically intelligent yet have great smarts. So I don't think, one always relates to the other. In terms of intelligence, that is definitely a thing. I'd always say like that was a strength of mine. I had plenty of weaknesses. I came into a team. I was slow to develop, so I was always often the lightest, definitely the weakest, not often the fastest. I had to work really hard at those parts of my game. A lot of it's off the field in the gym. It was a battle for me. Like those were the bits I didn't enjoy. I was naturally really fit, but I didn't have natural strength, and I had to work really hard to get my speed even close to the other backs I was playing with. But I knew I understood the game. I read the game. I could see what other players were doing, and I could back myself to almost be half a second ahead. And that's hugely, obviously, helpful both sides of the ball. And what I mean by that is when we had the ball, I could sort of always anticipate what other players were going to do, and so get myself into a really good position to take advantage of that. And I actually think that's a really underrated part of rugby, and it actually made up for a lot of my weaknesses around strength and speed that I mentioned. I actually, because you're half a second ahead in thinking and anticipating, you're actually ahead of where the faster guy is on the field. And, I always used to get told, "Oh, you're always in the right spot." And I think that was because I could sort of see what players were going to do. And that obviously helps, because the better the players are, the higher the grade that I played, actually the easier it was for me, because playing with the Dan Carter and Manonu, I could understand what they were going to do. And because they're so consistent, they'd always do it. And so I could read that, and that's easier to read than at a lower grade where you think he's going to do one thing and he doesn't always do it. He doesn't have the skill set, or he's not as consistent. So
Yeah.
I think those things definitely help my own game. And then I think in terms of the team, I think naturally when you sort of watch a lot of rugby, experience a lot of rugby with experience, you sort of get an understanding of oppositions and teams, and you start to sort of know what they're going to do, both some of the individuals in the opposition, but also as a team, how they're going to play. And obviously how that can benefit you is how you prepare for that, and what you've got to watch for in those opposition players, and what that the team does really well. And so I think I understood that within myself. That's what I brought to the team. And so every chance I got, I'd share that knowledge, share what I was seeing. And I think I'm quite a shy individual, so it's not something I did naturally straight away. And it was really encouragement and urging of guys like Richie and Dan and a whole lot of others, always pushing me and asking me questions, particularly when I started, that sort of helped me contribute a lot more. And sort of the longer I played, the more comfortable I was to talk with players and share those sort of insights and realize that that's what I did offer to the team. And that's what you need to back your own strengths. And that's something, I did particularly the longer I played.
Awesome. Conrad, I don't know who it was. I don't know if it's a friend or if you've got mates like me. Usually they sort of take the piss and banter, but there was some bloke, and forgive me, it was a clip, and you'll maybe remember this. Forgive me that I haven't got the name. And he said he turned up, he was scrawny, but it was his coachability that got him where he was. And I think you might know who that person is now, but like they sort of said that, and I should do my research better. I've been desperately trying to find it, but like
Ben Hearing, was it? The guy,
yeah,
Ben Hearing, throwing the...
yeah, I knew you'd know. So what was it? What can you teach to the guys and girls listening to this about the attitude you took to coachability? Is that something that you always had when you were at Francis Douglas and at school? Because obviously, like you say, you've got the thinking with the rugby brain, but as you said, by your own admission, you weren't as naturally strong, you weren't as naturally fast, you had to work really hard in the gym. What was it that made you so coachable? What was it?
Yeah, I think, as you say, it was probably something I had to do when you come into the environments, like you say. Like, it was pretty tough. I remember joining both the Wellington Lions, the Hurricanes, so my first exposure to professional rugby, and I was the weakest in the gym, and I was the slowest in the speed testing, and that's disheartening. You're thinking, how am I going to survive? Like, these guys are everywhere. These athletes that are better than me, but yeah, you quickly think to, well, what am I good at? What are my strengths? And also, like, how is this going to work? Like, if I'm going to get picked, what's the coach going to like? And I knew, and I don't know where I learned it, but it seemed obvious to me that people like good people. That's an easy thing. And so when it comes to selection time, I wasn't always thinking, I want to be the best, because that's really hard for me as I say, when I'm looking at all these crazy athletes around me. But I've got to make sure I'm not the worst. The other guys that are going to get cut, and that's the reality and that's how cutthroat professional sport is. And I still remember being told the average career was 2 or 3 years. Like that's average. Some guys are less than that. So I loved rugby. As soon as I was given my first professional contract, I was thinking, man, I've got to make this last. And if I'm going to have to work really, really hard with my strength and my speed and all of that. But I'm just going to work really, really hard, and I'm going to be coachable, and I'm going to be the guy that coaches like seeing on the playing field, and surely that'll count for something. And so if you ask good questions, if you listen really, really well, and you be that guy that you don't want to I use that school slang, you don't want to be the greased guy that, rubs up the coaches. Like, it was nothing like that, but it was just the one that coaches can count on. You want to have that trust, and that's really from attitude. And I think the longer I played, the more I saw that, and you saw it on both sides. You saw guys that just wasted their talent and wasted all of those. They might have been gifted with speed and strength and all of that, but they wasted it just with a really poor attitude. And equally, the other ones like myself just had a great attitude. You want those people in your team, and that's why I just keep thinking, I'm going to be that guy. I'm just going to work really hard and see where it takes me, because I knew I could control that. Like, it felt like, as hard as I worked, I'm not suddenly to become this athlete that's super strong and super fast. So, but I can keep working really hard, and I know that's a sort of a contagious behaviour that can rub off on other people, and coaches are going to want that in their team. So it was almost a different way of looking at it. So not trying to be the best player, but just don't be the worst, just be the one that the coach is. He's always going to pick you. You want to be the guy that coaches is always. He might not start you every game, like that can even be your attitude, but he's not going to leave you behind. And that's sort of the attitude I took. And it got me through the first couple of years, and then, it sort of stuck with me for 15 years of playing professional rugby.
Amazing. What did you do specifically? No, I remember Sam Whitelock talking about the fact that he sat near the changing room door so he could be out first on the field. Were there specific things that you did that you showed the coaches that you were the guy that they could rely on and pick week after week? Were there particular routines or rituals or specific things standards you set yourself, or goals or things that you said, I'm going to execute on those things better than anyone else?
My fitness, I think I absolutely prided myself on that. Like, I came in again, I wasn't strong or fast, but I was fit. And actually, when you then study the human body, it almost stands to reason. I didn't have the short twitch fibers, but I had long twitch fibers. So I was really fit. I did a lot of cross country, and so running, when I came into the sport, was something easier for me. And so, whilst I was going to be at the bottom for the strength stats and the speed stats, I prided myself on being the hardest working, and I'd win all the fitness tests. That was something. And I knew there was something about being strong and fast, but being fit, showing that attitude, like that, to me, it was always something that meant a bit more. And it was a strength that I wanted to keep working on. And so there was definitely, when it ever came to fitness testing or anything within the training that involved a fitness component, like, I think any sport, any team, you might end of the training, right, we'll have a little fitness hit, and it might be 5 minutes, it might be 10 minutes, it could be a conditioning game. But those were the things I just, consciously or not, but I just knew, I was like, right, this is where I'm going to win. Like, this is where I'm going to show again my value to the team. And it got really personal, and because I remember at the start, I was this young kid. I didn't weigh a lot, so I could easily win all the fitness events. As my weight got up, it got a bit harder. And there was some young guys, like I remember a young TJ Perenara, a young Bodie Barrett. So these guys came into the team, and they knew by that stage that I prided myself on fitness, and no one was going to beat me.
I would just visualize a Bronco between you guys. Tell me.
They were real. You can visualize it. It happened, and it became an absolute battle, and it was weeks in the planning. And because we're finished now, we joke about this, but at the time, I'd come in and I'd be away on All Black duty, so the intricacies of the season, I wouldn't often come back into the team environment until they'd done some pre-season training. But I knew TJ and Bodie, and another guy, James Marshall, very fit player, and they were all, between themselves, were determined to take me down.
What did you? I love it. I love the competition. What was your Bronco? What was your time?
But this was the issue. The Bronco wasn't our fitness test. So, and so we would always be changing. Like, we started, it was a 1,500 meter. How did we do it? A 40, you did a 40, an 815, and then it went to a yo-yo. And then we did a beat test for a while. The fitness testing was always, the Bronco actually came in right at the end. So I couldn't even, it was my last couple of years, the Bronco was sort of brought in.
They became, right, I'm going to pick this guy off. He's right. I'm going to take him. Now, Conrad, I want to keep moving on some stuff. We talked a lot about the physical stuff. Let's talk about the mental stuff. There's a couple of things I want to talk about. Like, what did you learn in that leadership team with Kevin Miniamu, with Dan Carter, with Richie McCaw? Like, what did you learn from that environment with Gilbert and Kerry Evans and all these amazing people in this amazing environment? What did you learn about the mental and psychological side? What are some of the tools that you can share, useful for you?
Yeah, a lot. I think the immediate ones that jump out was the ability to turn pressure and to acknowledge pressure, but to turn it into an opportunity and to enjoy it, like enjoy the pressure that you're placed under. Like, that was a constant challenge. And I think when we were playing well and achieving great things, we were able to do that. And particularly as All Blacks, we always talked about the pressure that it puts you under. You're under immediate pressure.
Huge.
You step into it, and it can easily feel like a burden and weigh you down and make you nervous and, and create anxiety and all of that. But simply by changing with a mind shift attitude, with a different outlook as to what that pressure means, you can equally turn it from a burden to being something that puffs your chest out and stiffens your back. And I think back to, the times in my All Black career when, as I say, we achieved things and did, great things on and off the field. It was always because we did that really, really well. And every time you walked into the environment, walked out into the field, it was chest out, absolutely couldn't wait for your opportunity to add to the All Black legacy. There was never times, and I'm sure there were moments, but they were always, in the minority. But there were moments when you feel it's a baggage and you're weighed down by it and you're thinking, oh man, what do I do? And you're feeling the pressure from, or might be criticism from the media. It could be anything. You're worried about the team you're playing, you're worried about the result, you're worried about living up to expectation. But for the large part of my career, it was great and a large part to the work around that mental side, the psychology required. It was never seen like that. It was always something that was presented as an opportunity, something that was going to make you achieve great things. And for me, again, someone who probably naturally doubts himself, thinks of himself always as the smaller kid, the kid that needs to work so hard and is a little bit slower, a little bit weaker than the opposition. Suddenly I've got an All Black jersey on, and that's what's going to make me stronger, faster, and I'm already for that. So let's go beat the world, sort of thing. That's when you do it well. That's sort of the feeling that you have within that group.
Awesome. Hey, next question is around loss. And obviously you've had a few painful ones. The one that probably hurt the most maybe was with your All Black career was the 2007 World Cup versus France, where we exited in the quarterfinals. How did you deal, or maybe that came more with the psychological side and the Gilberts and the Kerrys and all those guys. How did you deal with bouncing back from that? How did you manage your mind? What did you do in the first 24 hours? What did you allow? What did you not allow? What was the environment like? What were your coping mechanisms? Were there tools that they gave you in the toolbox to reframe it? Cognitively reembrace would probably be the wanky words. What did you do?
Yeah, I Stephen's an interesting one for me. Like, I didn't play in the game, and it still doesn't mean it didn't hurt massively, and it still stands out as probably a low point of my career, even though I didn't play, because I was within that group. And if anything, my memories are like watching some of my heroes absolutely broken in the changing room, men in tears about a game. And I had sort of these conflicting thoughts of like, this is just a game, but at the same time, man, this hurts. Like, this is why we're such a proud nation, and this is why it means so much. And I think if you talk to the players, coping mechanisms, I'm not sure we did cope very well in the 24, 48 hours after that particular game. I think I'd think back to other losses where we handled it better. But in the long run, the way the All Blacks and the team came back from 07 was what set up the next two World Cup victories. If you had asked most of the people that stayed around, they will point to 07 as being a turning point. And the reason we look at it that way is because as much as it hurt, we understood it wasn't all bad. Like, there was so much that we had done. And I still look at that team of 07 as probably the strongest All Black squad I've ever been a part of. We lost a quarterfinal, the worst result in World Cup history. Yet I reckon it's one of the best squads we've ever had at any World Cup. But so and our results leading into that World Cup were incredible. So we were doing a whole lot right. And so we didn't completely, we kicked all the coaching staff. We kicked the majority of the players that weren't leaving already. We kicked a whole lot that we were actually, of our structures, that we were doing right. A lot of our game plan, all of this, we actually with the thought. This is over 8 months because the immediate reaction is get rid of everyone, get rid of the
Clean
coaches,
them out.
clean them out.
Get rid of them all. Yeah.
Exactly, and the coaches, and it started with New Zealand Rugby. They kept the same coaches under huge criticism, but those coaches looked at it and they identified things. There were absolutely things we needed to change, and I think we spent the next 2 or 3 years doing that. I think, and the biggest one was mental, and we recognised that at World Cups mentally we weren't preparing in the right way. We were preparing like All Blacks did for any other test. Like All Blacks had a rich history of winning everything we played for, but we were losing World Cups. And the key reason we could see was that everyone else treated World Cups as an absolute pinnacle. And we still thought of them as a pinnacle event, but actually All Blacks wanted to win every game. We play a Bledisloe, we want to win. We play a rugby championship. And the other nations we understood and we understand now, they say something. There's something different. And that's what we get to a World Cup, and we were playing in a quarterfinal, the French team that we'd absolutely thrashed 7 months earlier. We're playing out of their skins, and there were things happening that we weren't prepared for because we had prepared just for another All Black game where we were going to play well and we were going to win by 10, 20, 30, whatever it took. But we would just go through the motions, that real high standard. But actually, we needed to find another level, another gear for World Cups. And that's all the focus was, I know, into 2011 and 2015. It was like we were going to win as many tests as we can, as All Blacks demand. But when it came to a World Cup, we knew now this is a truly unique experience. Things are going to happen that don't happen in any other tests, that don't happen in the Bledisloe, don't happen in a rugby championship, and we had to be prepared mentally as much as anything for that. So, that's how I think, we rebounded out of that 07. We put everything we could, all the we could. We actually acknowledged there was a whole lot we were doing well, and we kept hold of that, and then, and put that all together to sort of build and revenge really what had happened.
Yeah, I like the word revenge. I like the word you saw it as an opportunity. I also like the fact you used the word turning point and the foresight that the rugby union had to keep hold of the coaching staff. We know that all the research, the more consistency and continuity there in the team, usually there's a correlation with performance in terms of constant turnover. So tell us, Conrad, take us inside the environment of the All Blacks. This word environment is a thing that I hear a lot about when I learn and research about you guys. You're very deliberate about the design, the environment, who comes in there. You get certain people to come and talk to you before games. You've got searching coaching staff of different disciplines and domains. What was that environment like after World Cup, and as you grew and you got the psychology and you got that mental, those top 2 inches, which you all identified was the area that you needed to improve? Like, what were the standards? What changed? What were some of the things you studied? I know you have a black book, don't you? You have an all black book. I imagine, do you still have it? I assume. I'm not going to ask you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's very personal to you, very sacred to you, but you write in it and you use it as a diary, but there's some rules in that black book because you used going up another gear, another level, and the importance of standards. And I think one of the beautiful quotes from Steve Hansen, he says, the standards you walk past are the standards you accept. So what did you do, and what was that environment, that black book, what you are happy and comfortable to tell us, to take it to that next level? What did you demand of each other, and what went on in that environment to take you then to obviously then go and take out 2 Rugby World Cups in succession?
Yeah, I think there was a whole lot that goes into whether you call it an environment, a culture, and I think the key is sort of identifying things that are going to be special and add to your culture, provide meaning, and you can put a lot of time and effort into those, and I think, because I think that's a danger. Like I see a lot of other sports teams and companies, and you sort of, because the easy thing is you see something and, I'll copy that and we'll do that in our environment. But I think we were very careful around the All Blacks to sort of just find the things that suited our group, suited our identity, and put time and energy into that, and make sure they they added to what, ultimately our vision for the team. And I think the Black Book, like that's just one example. That was something we wanted to honour our heritage, our tradition. Like that's a big part of the All Blacks. It's 100 years of success that you when you walk into, and what I talked about right at the start, like that can create pressure, or you can see it as actually giving you energy, and an easy way for it to give you energy as you acknowledge it. You start talking about openly about like the great things that All Black teams have achieved, and so that Black Book would have at the front of the book just little slices of the All Black original team, what they achieved, the early Grand Slammers, the unbelievable, all of those great teams, just a few pages. So your All Black Book would start by showing you the legacy and this jersey that you are now, you don't own, but you're going to be a caretaker for your career. This is, and this is all part of it. And so then, as you say, there's empty pages in that book, and you're free to write. Some guys write, some guys don't. It's up to you. But the idea is that you're getting handed this book. It's symbolic, but it shows you part of the legacy that you're now have the opportunity to contribute to. And so there'll be all these things within that. And I actually think the All Blacks, there's a whole lot of things, the haka, the black jersey, the silver fern, all of these special things that actually make it quite easy. There's a lot of work that goes into it, but you're handed a lot of things that just make it really special from the outset. And we knew that, and that's what, like, as I say, we're always trying to find things to improve our culture and add to the culture. But they could never be corny, or they could never be forced. You want to find genuine things. And the standards was, something that we just knew we had to live by. If you're going to enhance that legacy, then another one I get asked a lot about is this, the call about sweeping the floor. And that behaviour, and that was just a standard. And that's not something that we even like wrote up on the wall or had to tell everyone. That was just
expected. And when you take
it was just a behaviour. It was out of that humility. It was, if you start again, the vision of being a great All Black side, and some of those, the values that fall within that, one of them that is very dear, I think, to any Kiwi, is humility and being absolutely, you said it before, you are humble. Like every Kiwi expects, even an All Black that wins World Cups, you still got to be humble about it. And so how do you show that as a behaviour? Then you have good standards, and you sweep a floor. Like if you walk out of a changing room, just because you've won a test match, you might have won a World Cup. It doesn't mean you're going to leave dirt on the floor for someone else to pick up. Like that's not Kiwi. You are humble enough to go pick up your own mess and leave a changing room in the state that when you arrived. So that's one example of a heap I could think of. But those are the sort of stands, and everything like that contributes to your environment, contributes to your culture, and so it means that you're always, you're aware. And they're little markers that then you're not judging yourself just on a result on a Saturday. There's actually a whole lot of other things, a whole lot of behaviours and standards that you can live by from Monday to Friday before the game's even started, and that's how you can measure yourself, because if you're sweeping the floor, if you're being respectful, you turn in the right direction. The game, it might go on the bounce of a ball, but if you're living those other things, then your culture's strong, and the results will sort of take care of themselves. And that's definitely sort of that ethos that we sort of carried through a lot of that time.
I love what you talked about there for the listeners around your off-field behaviour being a big determinant and influence of your on-field behaviour, and the standards that you accept and the high bar you have in sweeping the sheds. And obviously James Kerr's book, Legacy, I've read it. I'm sure many listeners and viewers have as well. What did you write in your little black book, Conrad?
It's funny. I wrote a lot. It's interesting. It's been a while since I read it, but I know when I read it when I finished. I wrote a lot early on in my games, and I talked a lot about the anxiety and pressure that I felt in the lead up, and the self-doubt, that was always like, am I going to be good enough for this? But I knew that when it came to the games, they went well. And so you take a bit of confidence from that, because you almost forget about it. Like you go, you go on, and that's almost just this natural cycle. Right? And that's personal. Like that was something I know I went through almost on a weekly basis. Even when I played 80, 90 tests, I'd start a week, I'd be thinking about the opposition, self-doubt would come in, imposter syndrome. Am I going to be up for this? Am I going to be found out here? Have I really bluffed my way to this point? And then it was as if I needed that. And then as the week goes on, I start trusting my preparation, go through knowing what I can do. And then by Friday, I'm actually, I knew when I played well, I was at the point where I'd thought of everything that could go wrong, or I'd almost thought of every bad situation or bad possibility, and I'm just sick. I'm just ready to play. I'm just ready to go out into the field, and leave it all out there, because I'd sick of the negative thoughts. I'd sort of processed them all, and I knew there's nothing more than I could do. I remember I'd get to Saturday mornings, I was like, right, I've ticked all, I've trained, I've done everything I can. I know the game plan. Now I'm just going to go. Who cares if I'm not up for it? I'm gonna not die wondering. The whistle will start. I've got the jersey, and I'm just gonna tear into it. And
I just, for the listeners, particularly the sales guys out there, is you trust your prep. You trust prep. You've done the work, and so you control the controllable. And it's the same in sales, because business and sport have great analogies, as you know. And it's like, okay, so we didn't get the deal. But I did everything I possibly could to try and get that deal, and something else happened that was out of my control, or what you say, the bounce of the ball, and they ghost you, or they went with the competitor, or they bought this or whatever else. But I think that's very key, is you did all the work. And I love what it says when people say, oh, you must be really feeling under pressure, say you're on a losing streak. But the reality is the standards you set yourselves inside camp was so much higher than the standards that are outside. And you talk about it's a Monday to Sunday thing. It's not just a game day thing. So I absolutely love that. Was there something specific that you said to yourself? Because the Black Book sounds to me like almost journaling or forced reflection and part of the preparation. Because I imagine it's fascinating reading that Black Book to yourself and seeing your journey and watching you as you mature and get more comfortable with being who you are. What was there anything that sort of sticks out?
Well, because as you point out, the Black Book was very a reflective. So you would write that post the game, but leading up to the game, I would also, jot a few words down. Like start of your week, you're writing down moves and plays or things about the opposition you're playing, things you want to work on. But I would always get to the end of the week and have a few key things around, and they were keeping it simple. I knew, like that with doing the basics well, it would be whatever happens in the game, I knew I could catch pass. And the thing is, when pressure comes on, that becomes difficult. But if you just keep thinking, do the basics well, and you can get through a game. And that was a big one for me. And living in the now, like that was a huge, and that was straight a Gilbert Anoka philosophy theory, teaching, to the team that we'd do as a team, but for me as an individual, it really hit home, just in the now. Everything you talked about before, because especially in test match, like the bigger the pressure, the more the intensity, you suddenly, your mind always goes back to things that have happened. So if you've made a mistake and you dwell on them, or you're thinking into the future because you really want to win and you don't want to lose, but all you can control is what's in the now, like what's happening right in front of you. And so the ability to stay in the now is actually, it sounds easy, but it is actually
it's very
really difficult.
Because either living the future or we're using the negativity of the past. But you're smack on. Like all you can do is be present right there. And obviously, Kerry Evans talks about your red zone, your sympathetic versus your blue and your parasympathetic. And there's a few more questions I want to ask you. The leadership voice. How did you develop your leadership voice? Because by your own admission, you're like, hey, I was picked. I got in this leadership team. You were with some amazing heroes. The names Richard McCaw and Dan Carter, and you were in that team of, I think, 5 in that leadership team, and setting the example to others, helping the team. How did you develop the leadership voice? The reason I ask that is when I train rural sales managers, sometimes they're very high performing reps and then they get promoted into a managerial position and they're in charge of other guys and girls, but they're still trying to learn their leadership voice. What advice would you have to them, or what was your journey like?
Yeah, everyone's different. Like that's absolute. Like no one leader. Like I had a Tana Umanga as a leader, completely different than a Richie, than a Kieran Reid, and so there was no one style that's better than the other. Like I just think, and I still say that even when I was with the Hurricanes and asking guys to step into leadership roles, I would always tell them, you've got to lead the way that's natural for you. Like there's nothing I'm going to tell you. Don't try and be someone you're not. Like if you're not confident speaking in front of the team, don't suddenly start, preaching and feeling like you're going to have to make team talks. Like if it's not your style, don't do it. And that doesn't mean it's wrong. So I think for me, it was understanding my role within the team, and it took a long time. Like I said right at the start, naturally, if you put me in a group, even now, like I'm not going to be one to speak straight away. I need to earn confidence and understand a group really, really well before I'm comfortable enough to speak, and try and tell someone what to do until I really know who they are and what they're going to respond to. So, within my All Black journey, I think it took time for me to lead. And even within the Hurricanes, I know a long time before I became captain, coaches were asking me, come on, you got to lead more, you got to do more. But I was naturally like, no, I'm not ready. And I wanted to, but I couldn't, I knew I couldn't force myself. But when I had the confidence, when I knew my role within the team, when I knew what I could offer, then it becomes easy. So I think when I got my confidence, when I saw my role within the team, and I saw it, like there were Richie McCaws, there were Dan Carters, they could perform superstar things on the field. They were special. And I was the one, I felt my role was to talk to the guys, and because I knew that's quite daunting on a player coming into an All Black, and almost that expectation to be a superstar. And so my message was always, we don't rely on superstars. All Blacks, the majority of the team is just going to do the simple things really, really well and do them time after time after time. And that you can be a great All Black that way. Don't think about scoring tries or making big tackles or making huge plays, because that can be, I knew for myself, if I'm thinking that way, I'm suddenly straight away that legacy, that's becoming a burden. But I'm just thinking, I'm going to catch pass, I'm going to tackle, I'm going to do it every time. I'm just going to keep executing. And I knew, that would be my message. That's what I'd say. That's how I play the game. And then, that would prick the ears of a lot of young players within the team. And I felt that was the message I'd always, give within that context. And as I say, your good leadership group, you all have sort of different roles. And I felt that was sort of where I fitted into within that group.
So you kind of did the reps, you did the work, you didn't get flash, you just did the basics. And it's interesting, my sales guys, you got to be willing to do the work. You have to put in the work. Conrad's using his analogy of rugby, and I'm using what I see very pathetically, and what I see in my small world is you can trust yourself when you've done the work. And I think what you said about trust the prep. What's some of the biggest lessons you learnt as a leader, Conrad? You've had an illustrious career, a very successful career. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned?
It doesn't always work. And the challenging times are when you follow a process. It might work 2-3 times, and then it fails, and everyone starts questioning, and then it might fail again, and just the ability to keep trusting what you're doing. Like, of course, as you're going through that, you're revisiting it, and you're doing all that natural review work, but you got to serve that, and then just trust who you are, what your vision is, and you just keep playing on. And that's hard. That's really hard. And that's where being a leader is hard, because everyone's looking at you and wanting you to lead them effectively, to show that trust. So it's sort of an added weight on your shoulders. But I just think that's where the strength of the group comes through. Like, it is not a one-man show. Like, I knew that within the leadership group behind, a captain like Richie, but then captaining the Hurricanes as well. The amount of time I would be saying to the, Hurricanes, our leadership group, I was like, boys, we're all in this. Like, don't leave it on me. And they'll always respond to that whenever you ask them. But naturally, it's something that you can leave to the captain. You sort of sit back, but you got to keep prodding them, saying this is a team effort. Like we can't. Leadership's not. It's never been a one man job. So the strength of the leadership's definitely is in a group, not an individual.
What did Richie and Dan? What were the questions they started asking you to get you, to get up to that level that they wanted you? Were there conversations they had with you, that things that stuck in your mind specifically? They're like, yeah, that was a really good question, or that was a really good piece of advice, or what, poke or prod, or whatever it happens to be. Because sometimes you've got to have those conversations, haven't you?
Yeah, I think very much it was those guys encouraging me to contribute, and because, like you say, I was a leader, but naturally, sort of, particularly when times are tough, and you're sort of like, okay, I'll leave it for you guys to lead, but they were the ones exactly as I spoke about. Come on, I need you here. We're all in this together. We're going to lead us out of this. If we're in a bit of a spot of bother on the field or off the field, if we, responding from a loss. And so it was more, I think back to myself personally, it was encouragement. When Richie says to you, look, I value you, I love it when you talk about this, or I need you to tell the boys to do this, then man, that gives you confidence, because it's one of your peers saying that's what you're doing. The same Dan saying, well, tell us what you see, tell us what you see. They value your contribution, and so that's that would always sort of bring me from that position of sort of sitting back to actually pushing forward and wanting to help.
Who's been your biggest influence? And you can choose anyone, but and if so, specifically, who were they? Because we've dropped some pretty big names here. These amazing players and
Yeah.
amazing coaches. Who's had the most influence on your life and mentored you, or just really stood out for you? And if so, what was it specifically they taught you or mentored you about?
I think when you think of life, like, I was pretty lucky. Like my dad, two older brothers that were massive for me growing up in a family. Obviously a mum and sister, but having that male influence through my life and childhood, and I think that's as much as anything what gave me the attitude to what I've talked about, just to keep working, never give up. I know, that was something my dad would always talk to me about. He had the same attitude, sort of great player himself. Injuries sort of meant he retired at about 25, but I knew that was when we talked, it was always just about effort that he cared about. It was never about results, and so that stuff has a lasting impression. I think that set me up to then, when I had opportunities, I can't look past the coaches I had within the All Black environment, like the Wayne Smith, Steve Hansen, Graham Henry, Ian Foster at a later stage, but they were all huge in terms of just, as I said before, for me as an individual, it was about giving me confidence. Just if someone gave me confidence, then that was all I needed, and I could just keep, stepping further beyond where I naturally would back myself to go. And
They
so,
could see that, they could see the potential in you, Conrad, before you could. And I think that's what,
absolutely.
leaders create leaders, and leaders create more leaders, and then leaders create more leaders. What's some of the best piece of advice you've been given? What stands out for you?
I think to go back to another a player, Tana. So Tana Umaga is a All Black captain. So I was a midfielder, but aside, next to him when I started. And I've talked about how I struggled when I first started, because I looked at Tana, I looked at Ma'a, I looked at Tane Tuipulotu, another midfielder, and these guys we were the midfielders in the Hurricanes. And they were all fast, explosive, strong players that I wasn't. And I remember Tana saying, just do what you do well. And it stuck with me my whole career, because, he was saying, he could probably see that I was getting a bit disillusioned, because I was thinking, man, I'm never going to be as fast and strong as you. But he could see that, you're not going to be that type of midfielder, but you can offer something that we can't do, And so when Tana says that to you, like, you can do things on the field that I can't. And that's suddenly like massive confidence hit, and actually channels your energy in the right direction. Like, actually start thinking about what I'm good at, not just the things that I'm going to struggle with, because that gets you down. Like think of the things that are going to make you great on a rugby field. And I know that was something that I never sort of forgot it, and still comes to mind every time I get asked that question.
That's awesome. Hey, last few questions. You've been so good. Is if you were talking to a guy or a girl, and your audience, they're rural reps. Sometimes it goes well. They got commodity cycles. Sometimes farmers got money. Sometimes they haven't. Sometimes they're selling lots. Sometimes they're selling not. And they're struggling or suffering. I think if they're smart enough and listen to the themes of what you've been saying, there's some big themes coming through, like trust your preparation, do the basics, be willing to do the work, the sacrifice, commitment, focus on your key strengths, all those things. What would you say to that person listening who knows that they could be better? What advice would you have for them? What would you say to them around getting them out of where they are now to where they want to be? What would you say? What would you say to them?
I think if they want to be better, then that's the battle won. Like you then act on that, and you just look for ways you can be better. You've got to be realistic about it. Like all the messages you said before, you trust what you've done. If you're doing well, if you're executing all the things that you've set up for yourself, then sometimes it's the uncontrollables that might be letting you down, and you've just got to ignore them. As hard as that is, you've got to know at the end of the day, look, you've done what you can, and if you're you got to keep exploring. So you start with what you said. You're looking for ways to get better. Find those ways, execute them the same way you've been executing your sort of plan up until now, and then it's just trust and having good people around you, so that you stay the course, and things will turn. And that's I think that's how you get through, and certainly the advice I give to young rugby players. Like if you've got the attitude right, but some of them don't have a good attitude, and so then you sort of give them a bit of a talking as to what they should focus on. But once you got the attitude right, it's just about having trust in what you're doing, and staying the course. And it's sometimes a battle, and I know farming is like sport, and all the there's a lot of examples in life that it's not always fair. The wins don't always go to the best team, as odd as that sounds. But in the fullness of time, I'm a firm believer that true character shows out and comes through, and so that's what you sort of just people have got to keep at the front of their mind, and trust that that's how it will work out.
If a rep was lost a deal and they're ruminating, and it's probably not as bad as losing a Rugby World Cup, which I know you're part of the squad and you weren't on the field, but there you were watching your heroes. Absolutely, I can't imagine what the changing shed was like. What advice would you have them to get out of their funk? Because some of these guys mope. They mope for a week. And I'm sure you've seen it with some of your players, some of your environment. Like, what would you say to them? Say, hey, you lost the deal. In your case, you lost the game. Maybe it was a game you expected to win, or, you got all the signs and the telltale signs, good buying signals. I'm talking in my sales world here because I don't have the rugby reference or authority. What are some of the tools in your toolkit you've been taught to say, right, this is how Conrad Smith bounces back from loss, and how he's resilient, and how he can get back on that horse? Were there any sort of things that you used to sort of bounce back? Because they always say pain is the greatest teacher, and you only lose when you don't lose the lesson. But what would you say to them about how you bounce back from loss when you think you're going to win something you didn't, or it didn't go your way? And you must have so many experiences of this.
Yeah, I like two things. The first, you got to put into perspective. Like I think of breaking my leg, and it was months of where I felt, like this is it. Just when I thought I was building a professional rugby career, it's all over. I'm never coming back. You put it into perspective. Like it's a broken leg. You've got your health. Even if you don't get your rugby career back, you're alive. You got your family. You got things around there, and that's the same I'd say to someone that's lost the deal. Like there are far greater things in life that you should be worrying about, your health and your family and things that should come first. Like put it in perspective, and then turn that energy into positive energy. Like if you're that annoyed about it and you think you should have got it, turn it into excitement about getting the next one. Like that's a direct correlation to what we did. We 07 and all in our own ways, we put it into perspective. We just lost a rugby game. It wasn't the end of the world. For them, all that negative, that anger, that frustration, everything that we had went directed into one in 2011. And that's what we do. It takes a bit of time, but you just turn it around and say, right, this is going to make 2011 extra special. Everything we've learned, that's no more moping what we should have done, what we could have done. Like, this is okay. This is what we're gonna do. This is what we should do. This is what we can do. And that's how you rephrase all that. And again, suddenly it's just turning something around, simple attitude change, and suddenly you're walking with your shoulders back and your chest puffed out, and that's when you go and achieve.
That's such good advice. Last thing, habits, routine rituals, Conrad. What are the ones you still use now that you use? Maybe it's learning, maybe because we know you're a physical beast in your cross country and you had those long twitch muscles. And Josh Shanley's talked to me about France Douglas when we were all taking out and all that sort of stuff. And we're very grateful to Josh for helping us facilitate this. Are there specific habits, routines, and rituals you have that you use and you still use today that really help you learn, improve, grow? Because we could talk about the rugby stuff and the physical stuff, and that's really important. But are there things that you do that really work for you?
The ones we've discussed, like I think, like I absolutely am the first for knowledge and for new things. Like, I think that's just such a key part. I know it motivates me. Like, if I see something I'm not sure about, rather than sort of letting it slide by, I'm like, okay, that's the easy option, but I'm going to go find out here. And I've had that since I was a kid, and I think it's set me up well. And so I just try and activate that all the time. If there's something I can find out more about or push myself into, then I'll do that. And the other thing is just the ability to deal with pressure. Like, I just think that's such a underrated skill, and it's not something you're born with. Like, that is the one thing I tell, mainly in a rugby environment, because that's what I was still in. But this idea that some people deal with pressure really well. They'll talk about the great players, and they just never seem to look like they're pressure, and so they think that's a skill I'm born with. But you can absolutely work on that. There are mechanisms and I've been talking about them. Like, when everyone feels pressure, it's the way you manage that, and you can turn it into excitement, and you don't turn it into a burden. You can work and find different coping mechanisms to do that, and that's what you do during a rugby career. It can be what you do during your business career, and that's what sets you up to achieve great things, because there's pressure coming from everywhere, but it doesn't need to be stress. Like, it doesn't need to be a burden. Like, and that's the skill to do that. It's learned. It's something that you can work on. So, and it's something that I still do. Like, I still feel pressure, and sometimes it turns into stress, and I just think back to all those little skills I learned during rugby. Hang on, this is an opportunity here. Like, think about it positively. Don't let it weigh you down. So, I think that'd be the main ones I still try and live by.
Conrad, you've been an absolute legend. Thank you for doing it.
No
I
problem.
think the listeners will have learned so much. What a career. And now obviously you're in World Rugby Legal Council, and you're in that world now, because a lot of All Blacks, like, some of them go on to amazing heights and some of them don't, but here you are, because your role now is officially your legal counsel for the Rugby Players Federation. Is that correct?
Almost, yeah. So we're international rugby players. So we involved with World Rugby. We actually battle with World Rugby on a regular basis. But no, it's a player from a legal background, sort of fell into the player representative role, and worked with New Zealand rugby players for a long time. So it's now international rugby players, and it's a great role within World Rugby. I say battle with them, but it is very much it's a good constructive partnership that we have, and I still love the game, and it's challenging for me. It's making me think about the game in different ways, and I'm no longer playing, but it's still very much involved with the game, which something I've loved. So it's nice to sort of give back in another form.
Yeah, and I could think of no better bloke to be in their corner, whether it's men or women's game. Conrad, well done, my man. Hey, just last thing personally, thank you so much for all the help and generosity with Jossie next door to you in D Street in Island Bay back in the day, who's my lovely mother-in-law. And then what you did to Barry when he had MMD. I know when you paid him tickets to that Island game, that was a very, very special moment. So on behalf of Maria and Jossie and Anna and Nio, you're a hell of a good bloke, mate. You know that already. Great people make great All Blacks. You're definitely one of them. And thanks so much for being so generous, giving your time to us and our listeners. I think there's absolute gold here. I hope they listen to it again and again. There's so much experience. So thank you.
Too kind. Thank you. No, they were great neighbours. So good people. It's cool to stay in touch. It's a small world. The way you end up meeting people around things like that. It's cool. I like it.
You think New Zealand is a very small world indeed, and we thank you, Josh Shanley, as well, for putting in touch. Thank you, sir.